We're here today in Delaware County with Dominic and Charlie Maurone, and they're going to tell us a few stories about the experiences they encountered serving our country in the Pacific during World War II and in Vietnam during the Vietnam years. Dominic, how are you today?
What did he say?
How are you today?
How are you?
Fine.
You want to tell us when you went into service, what year you went into service?
What year did you go into service?
1943.
And how old were you at that time?
Going on 19.
What base did you report to?
Where did you go to boot camp? Boot camp.
Where was it?
Where was it?
Was it in Great Lakes?
It was in Illinois. Forget the name of it.
Was it Great Lakes?
Great Lakes.
Great Lakes, Illinois.
Very good. And when you left for overseas, where did you report? Did you go to the Hawaiian Islands first?
Where was your first overseas posting? When you went to the Pacific, where did you go first?
Where did I go?
First.
The Marshall Islands.
The Marshall Islands.
What ship were you aboard? What ship were you aboard?
I was on an LCI 440. It was an amphibious ship.
Carried troops?
Troop carrier?
No. It was a ship that would fire on different islands to allow the Marines or the soldiers to make a landing.
And what islands did you shell first? What island did you shell first? You recall?
Where was your first combat?
Marshall Islands. 22 islands. We were hit on the last island. We lost 8 men and 32 wounded out of a crew of 50. I didn't get a scratch.
And then where were you deployed?
Where did you go next from the Marshall Islands?
Well, the next from the Marshall Islands, we went to the Marianas. There were 3 islands that we invaded there. Saipan, Guam, and Tinian.
Was your ship hit during that exercise? During that combat?
During that exercise? Was the ship hit at all during that?
No, it was hit in the Marshall Islands. It's the only time we were ever hit.
And then where did you head for?
Where'd you go after that?
After the Marianas,
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
we went to the Philippines. Well, we would go back to Pearl Harbor, to have new guns put on, equipment, stuff like that. And then from the Marianas, we went to the Philippines.
Were you part of the MacArthur force that went back to the Philippines, or was before that invasion?
Were you involved with MacArthur going back to the Philippines?
Well, I guess MacArthur was leading the troops in, yeah. What we did is we would fire on the islands, get within maybe 100, 200 yards, and fire on the beaches until our Marines or soldiers would make a landing, then we would pull back.
Very good. And then after the Philippines?
After the Philippines?
After the Philippines, well, we always went back to Pearl Harbor, and then our next invasion was the Okinawa.
And that was that your final invasion of the war, Okinawa?
Was that your final invasion of the war in Okinawa?
Yeah, when we got back, right after that, the war was over, yeah.
And you returned to Pearl Harbor?
You went back to Pearl Harbor.
Yep.
And then
Pearl Harbor was our landing base.
And then back to Philadelphia?
Well, from there we went to, I believe it was Virginia. That's where we went.
Did you come out of the Navy at all when the war was over, or did you report?
Yeah, I went to the hospital.
You went to the hospital where? In what city?
My years.
In Hawaii? Were you in the hospital in Hawaii?
Oh, I spent 2 months in the hospital in Hawaii. Then I was shipped back to the United States, to Virginia. I spent another month in the hospital in Virginia. And then from Virginia, I come up to the Philadelphia Naval Base. And I spent the next 6 or 8 months there until I was discharged.
What year were you discharged? You recall that year?
1946.
And you were in the hospital because of what? Damage? Were you injured or one of the ship's attacks?
Why were you in the hospital?
Where was I?
Why were you in the hospital?
I had a eye infection.
And how did you lose your hearing? Did you lose your hearing when you were in the service?
Well, I guess I lost my hearing from being aboard the ship and making an invasion on all these different islands. I was the first loader on a 40 millimeter cannon. And our ship was really a gunship, and we would fire 5-inch rockets in salvos, maybe a couple of hundred rockets into these islands. So I guess what happened, I lost my hearing because of all the noise.
Thank you, Dominic Maurone, and thank you
Did he have shrapnel in his eye? Didn't he have
for your
shrapnel?
service.
What happened to your eye?
It was shrapnel.
I had an infection called chorioretinitis. I don't know how I caught the infection. I have a blind spot in the left eye, over to the right of the eye.
Now, how is your hearing today? You had lost it for a while. Didn't you get a recent operation to restore your hearing?
How is your hearing today?
Well, without this here implant, I can't hear at all. I have a cochlear implant that I had done a couple of years ago. So if I take the equipment off, I can't hear at all.
Very good. Thank you, Dominic, and thank you for your service. Now we're going to talk a little bit with your son, Charlie Maurone, who also served our country. And Charlie, where did you serve and when did you serve?
Went into 1968, and I served at Parris Island. I got through my boot camp at Parris Island, and then I served with the 2nd Marine Division down in Guantanamo Bay before it became famous. Did jungle warfare training in Guantanamo Bay. Then I transferred out to Camp Pendleton, and I went through Marine Corps Reconnaissance Training School and the staging for WestPAC, which is Western Pacific. The acronym actually meant you were going to Vietnam. I landed in Vietnam in Da Nang in the summer of 1969, and I served with the 3rd Marine Division as a recon Marine. At that time, we were trying to, when I say we, the United States was trying to negotiate with the North Vietnamese peace talks. President Nixon and Henry Kissinger was the Secretary of State. They came to an agreement where the 3rd Marine Division was pulled out, and I transferred from the 3rd Marine Division down to the 1st Marine Division, and I served with the 7th Marine Regiment in Lima 3-7. I ran number of different operations throughout the northern part of South Vietnam, and then in February of 1969 I was wounded and medevaced out of country to Yokohama, Japan. I spent about 6 weeks in the hospital in Yokohama, and then I was medevaced back to the Philadelphia Naval Yard, and from there I was the bartender at the Tun's Tavern, the enlisted man's club at the Philadelphia Naval Yard while I awaited orders. Eventually I transferred to Quantico, Virginia, where I served a period of time as an instructor at the Officers Candidate School. I received an honorable separation, and then in 1974 I received an honorable discharge from the Marine Corps.
Thank you, Charlie, and thank you for your service.
My honor.